Good morning and welcome to the regular council meeting for the Corporation and Township of Minden Hills for Thursday, November 14th, 2024. A big thank you to start out with to the county staff for assisting and providing us their council chambers while our township building roof is being repaired. It's greatly appreciated. In review of today's agenda, there are 3 public meetings, applications for zoning bylaw amendments, and Councillor Saini is providing a delegation regarding healthy democracy. And there will also be a closed session meeting near the end of the agenda. Madam Clerk, please proceed with a roll call.
Councillor Sisson,
Present.
Councillor Saini,
Present.
Councillor McKelvey,
Present.
Councillor Johannesson,
Present.
Councillor Ingram,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Shallett,
Present.
Mayor Carter.
Present. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Minden Hills is located on Treaty 20 Michisagi territory and in the traditional territory of the Michisagi and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which are Curve Lake, Rama, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. We acknowledge the shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. I call this meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. Madam Clerk, please proceed with reading the resolution for the approval of the agenda.
Moved by Councillor Saini, seconded by Councillor Sisson. Be it resolved that the November 14th, 2024 regular council meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
All those in favor? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will move on to the public meetings. Please, Madam Clerk, please read the resolution.
Moved by Councillor Saini, seconded by Councillor McKelvey, that council adjourn its regular meeting at 9:02 a.m. to proceed into public meetings regarding the following: Report 2491 Planning, Application for Zoning Bylaw Amendment, PLZBA 2024063 Cox. Report 2492 Planning Application for Zoning Bylaw Amendment, PLZBA 2024041 Kellett, Application 1. And Report 2493 Planning Application for Zoning Bylaw Amendment, PLZBA 2024056 Kellett, Application 2.
All those in favor? That is carried. Today, there are 3 public meetings held by council under Section 34 of the Planning Act, being for applications PLZBA 2024041, PLZAB 2024056, and PLZBA 2024063. These public meetings are an opportunity to present to council and the public the details and background to the proposed amendments and to receive comments from the public and agencies before a council decision is made. If a person would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of council to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions before the bylaw is passed, the person is not entitled to appeal the decision. So we start off with the first public meeting, which we call to order at 9:04 a.m. This public meeting is declared open and is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for part of Lot 19 and 20, Concession 4, in the geographic township of Minden, being 1874 Bethel Road. Would the Planning Department please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed bylaw and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, Council. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of the application, which is PLZBA 2024-063, property owners Carol and Roberta Cox, is to fulfill a condition of consent application H009-22, which would serve to resever the lands which were previously merged through common ownership with a slight realignment to the previous existing lot lines. The subject property is designated primarily rural, with portions of lands on both the east and south sides designated environmental protection. The subject property is currently zoned rural and hazard land. The environmental impact study that was prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions was to support the consent application, and that did identify certain watercourses and wetland communities. So the zoning bylaw amendment will serve to place those natural features currently under the rural zone into the hazard land zone, as identified and recommended in the environmental impact report across the subject property. Land zoned rural that have not been identified as environmentally sensitive are intended to be rezoned to rural exception 25 zone. Any new development will be required to maintain a 5-meter setback from the hazard land zone boundary, that is the rural 25 zone. And this will ensure that construction would not result in the destruction of the natural features, as well as preserving the vegetated buffer as recommended through the EIS. Notice of the application was circulated as required under the Planning Act on October 25th, 2024. The County of Haliburton has provided confirmation that they have no objections to the proposed applications. No further comments have been received either from public or agencies.
Okay, does the applicant have a presentation or wish to make any comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there's an agent that will be speaking on behalf of the applicant, and the deputy clerk is just bringing that attendee over virtually.
Okay,
No, we have no further comments. Everything's in the report.
I'm sorry, who just spoke?
Right, that was Adam Geyer, with Bishop Geyer Surveying.
Okay, so you have no comments.
Nope.
Okay. Moving on. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this?
We have no one that has registered, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Nobody's attending in person, so are there any questions or comments from council? Seeing none. As a result of these proceedings, does the planning department have any recommendations or comments that you wish to bring to the attention of council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as outlined in the staff report, we are recommending that council receive report 24-91 planning as information, and also that bylaw 24-118 being a bylaw to approve a zoning bylaw amendment for land subject of PLZBA 2024-063 be referred to the bylaw section of the agenda.
Okay, if there are no further questions, this completes the public meeting process. Anyone wishing to obtain notice of the decision may do so by making a written submission requesting such to the township clerk. I now declare this portion of the public meeting closed at 9:08 a.m. Moving to our next public meeting, I call to order at 9:08 a.m. This public meeting is declared open and is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for part of Lot 2, Concession 10 in the geographic township of Lutterworth, located at 1281 Denna Lake Road. Would the planning department please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed bylaw and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of this application, which is PLZBA 2024041, property owner John Kellett, is to fulfill a condition of consent application H041-23. This consent application, once complete, will serve to sever and create one new residential building lot. The rezoning before council today will serve to rezone both the severed and retained portions subject to that consent application. The portion of the property subject to rezoning is currently designated waterfront in the township's official plan and is primarily zoned rural with a small portion of lands at the south side being hazard land. A site evaluation report was prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions to support the consent. The zoning bylaw amendment will rezone the existing natural features, which are both watercourses and wetland communities, as identified in the site evaluation report, and place those under the protective zoning, being hazard lands. The amendment will also serve to recognize the existing development, which is on the severed parcel, which is a dwelling as well as several accessory structures and its proximity to the wetlands and watercourses. So it will be zoned from rural to rural residential exception 16 zone, and this will limit the development to the current developed lands, including the surrounding maintained lawn. The retained lands are intended for a future residential building lot, and the zoning bylaw amendment will similarly place the natural features currently in the rural zone into the hazard land zone, as identified again in the site evaluation report. Land zone rural that have not been identified as environmentally sensitive are intended to be zoned rural exception 26 zone. And so any new development within that zone will be required to maintain a 5-meter setback from the hazard land boundary. And that will be both for the rural residential 16 as well as the rural 26 zone. And this again will ensure that there won't be any destruction of the naturally vegetated area for the wetland or the water course. A notice of the application was circulated as required under the Planning Act on October 25th, 2024. And again, the County of Haliburton has provided that they have no concerns with the application, and we did not receive anything further from agencies or members of the public.
Does the applicant have a presentation or wish to make any comments?
Through you, Mayor Carter, yes, Sue Harrison is the agent for the applicant, and the deputy clerk will promote Ms. Harrison in just a moment.
Good morning.
Good morning. Please state your name and how you fit into this.
My name is Sue Harrison. I'm the planning consultant. I'm the authorized agent for John Kellett, who's the property owner. I think Amanda has provided a thorough overview. I agree with the recommendation. I appreciate the work staff put in to get us to this point on this application. And I'm just here should there be any questions that I may assist council with.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this?
There are no members of the public that have registered, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, as a result of these proceedings, does the planning department have any recommendations or comments that you wish to bring to the attention of council?
Through Mr. Mayor, as outlined in the staff report, we're recommending that council receive report 24-92 planning as information, and also that bylaw 24-119 being a bylaw to approve zoning bylaw amendment for land subject to PL ZBA 2024-041 be referred to the bylaw section of the agenda.
Okay, if there are no further questions, this completes the public meeting process. Anyone wishing to obtain notice of the decision may do so by making a written submission requesting such to the township's clerk. I now declare this portion of the public meeting closed at 9:12 a.m. And moving to our third public meeting. The meeting is called to order at 9:13 a.m. The public meeting is declared open and is considered a zoning bylaw amendment for part of Lot 2, Concession 10 in the geographic township of Lutterworth, being a vacant lot on the north side of Denna Lake Road. Would the planning department please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed bylaw and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of this application, which is PL ZBA 2024056, also under the ownership of John Kellett, is to fulfill a condition of consent application H041-23. This subject lot was created by conveyance of Forest Road, being Denna Lake Road, to the township, which formed a natural severance from the land subject to the application we just heard, PL ZBA 2024-041. The portion of the property subject to rezoning has dual designations, being partially in the waterfront designation as well as partially in the rural designation, that was primarily waterfront. The subject property is currently zoned rural in its entirety. The same site evaluation report prepared for the previous zoning bylaw amendment was also in consideration of this particular zoning. The zoning bylaw amendment would serve to rezone the 30 meters around the watercourse and the wetland that are identified on the property through the site evaluation report from rural to hazard lands zone in order to protect the natural heritage features. The remaining rural lands will be rezoned to rural residential exception 17 in order to allow for future residential development. The exception will require a development setback of 5 meters from the hazard land boundary, and this will ensure, as council's heard already a couple of times now, construction will not result in the destruction of the vegetated buffer around the wetland and watercourse feature. Notice of the application was circulated as required under the Planning Act on October 25th, 2024. And again, the County of Haliburton did provide confirmation that they have no concerns with the application, and we did not receive any further comments either from public or agencies.
Does the applicant have a presentation or wish to make any comments?
The applicant didn't attend, just the agent.
Okay.
Good morning.
All right, did you have any comments on this? Whoops.
I do not. I just here to answer any questions council may have.
Okay. Thank you. There any members of the public who wish to speak to this?
Mr. Mayor, we did not have any attendees register.
All right, and nobody is here present. Are there any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, as a result of these proceedings, does the planning department have any recommendations or comments that you wish to bring to the attention of council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as outlined in the staff report, we recommend that staff receive report 24-93 planning as information, and that bylaw 24-120 being a bylaw to approve zoning bylaw amendment for land subject of PLZBA 2024-056 be referred to the bylaw section of the agenda.
If there are no further questions, this completes the public meeting process. Anyone wishing to obtain notice of the decision may do so by making a written submission requesting such to the township's clerk. I now declare this portion of the public meeting closed at 9:16 a.m. Madam Clerk, please read the resolution to resume the regular council meeting.
Moved by Councillor Sisson, seconded by Councillor Saini, the council adjourns its public meetings and resumes its regular meeting of council at 9:17 a.m.
All those in favor? That is carried. We now move on to delegations. And Councillor Saini, please join us at the delegation table and kindly advise staff when they need to advance the presentation with next slide.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is interesting to be where the staff often present to us, so it's a good switching of chairs here. I want to start out by just saying what I'm bringing forward is information on the Healthy Democracy Project, which is a project of AMO, Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And as you can see by the mugs that you've all received, it's the 125th anniversary of AMO, representing almost 444 municipalities across the province. They have acknowledged and have been addressing issues around democracy for a very long time, working with us through education and training and policy analysis. And today, what I wanted to bring forward to you is the project launching that I attended called the Healthy Democracy Project, which was on October 19th and 20th in Toronto. And though this two-day launch directly supports my work as a counselor in Minden Hills and my work on the Roma board as a director, it seems most appropriate to bring this forward in a popular delegation to council format at this time. So colleagues and others can take the opportunity to review this presentation and accompanying resources and tools over the next few weeks. And I hope to get feedback on how democracy can better be encouraged and supported in our rural communities. My own explorations are based on democracy as a verb. I think we all understand that things are changing constantly. Our ways of doing business, technology, the environment, economics, our institutions are changing constantly. And if we don't maintain and nurture democratic values, we could lose those democratic values. So it's important to have an educated population on what is democracy and how we can improve every day as leaders of this community. So this project was launched in about 2 years ago by AMO. So it has been in the making for a while. And slide 2. About 2 years ago, the AMO Board of Directors initiated this, as I said, and the Healthy Democracy builds AMO's Win We All Win campaign. So let me just say it is to attract more diverse candidates to municipal office, support elected officials to be equity-informed leaders, promote more respect for the people engaged in democratic processes, encourage greater participation in local democracy, and an increase in voter turnout, promote greater civic engagement and greater awareness of the role of municipal governments. Slide 3. The AMO Healthy Democracy Project is to foster awareness of municipal government. We all have questions from many of our constituents. They don't understand we're a two-tiered government. They don't understand how we work as an organization, what we're responsible for, what we can do, what we can't do. And so this is part of knowing and understanding how municipal governance works. The other is to champion respect for democracy. So showing how all are treated in the same way, we are fair to every constituent, and the same process applies to all of us, no matter where we are or who we are. And the encouragement of broader participation in local governments, which is also very key, important to us. Just here in Minden Hills, we can see how in 2014, for example, I think we had over 5,500 people voting for the head positions of our council, and that has dropped to the next election to 3,000 something, and then an acclamation. And not to say that our acclamation wasn't a great choice, but I just want to say that we need to really get more people engaged in democracy and understanding our roles, and to encourage more involvement, and particularly to get more people out with an educated vote on democracy. So slide 4. Fewer people are voting and engaging in local democratic decision making. That's not a good sign for our democracy. And that's at every level of government. Fewer people are running for municipal office, and acclamations are on the rise. As indicated, Ontario's municipal councils are not representative of diverse populations they serve. Sometimes that's a key issue in terms of getting youth involvement. The other is, as AMO members, Ontario's municipalities elected officials are increasingly dealing with hostile, unsafe work environments where political dialogue has become a toxic and unproductive situation. So we often see the things that are going on in the public with Facebook and some of the ways that it's being used in derogatory ways and non-constructive are increasing the problems with trying to represent everyone and be a leader in the community. You put out your family at risk, and you're at risk when you start to become a leader. And that is one of the paradoxes that was brought out by one of the researchers in this project. So if we go to slide 5, Healthy Democracy Project Advisory Group provides guidance and advice from those with lived experiences, academic and tactical expertise, and shared commitment to advancing the health and democracy in Ontario municipalities. So you can see that this project was undertaken in many different types of research with people from very diverse perspectives, that they can bring the strength to make sure that we have some solutions that will work for us. And if we go to slide number 6, the Healthy Democracy Project builds on AMO's We All Win campaign and will attract more diverse candidates to municipal office, support elected officials to be equity-informed leaders, promote more respect for the people engaged in democratic processes, encourage greater participation in local democracy and an increase in voter turnout, promote greater civic engagement and greater awareness of the role of municipal government. These are all very important things that we need to have in the back of our mind as we go about our daily responsibilities and our monthly, yearly responsibilities as leaders in this community. So one of the things that was considered to bring this about, for example, is changing the age of voting, and some of the research that was behind some of that as well. So if we go to slide number 7, there were several experts with lived experience, the researchers presenting over the 2 days. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of the slides here. And so Kofi Hope was the co-founder of Momental Project, Equity Informed, Respect of Democracy, and Civil Engagement. His presentation was quite dynamic and insightful with the research that he conducted of people who had been thinking or had run for office. What I liked about his analysis is the risk-reward in running for politics. As we talked about before, there are certain risks, and then there are certain rewards in these leadership positions. The risks, of course, are often financial baseline in terms of making sure that you can afford to raise your family and to have a place to live with the salaries that are presented, for example. There's also the rewards that you get in terms of serving your community and seeing things happening in a way that people are growing in community and seeing things change around you in a very positive way. And then, of course, there's the problems of putting yourself out there. So the common barriers that he identified was timing of the incumbents, the family and career conflicts, financial barriers, access to social capital, mentoring and volunteering, mental health toll by bullying, harassment, discrimination, accessibility challenges can also be an issue. Then the common enablers assets are like personal skills and capabilities, advocates, mentors, and cheerleaders from within the system, people that encourage others to run. And this is rooted in strong community identity and or in professional groups and the timing of when the elections are and what's going on in your life. So these are common things to consider as people look at becoming leaders and becoming part of our community and our leadership. So one of the people in slide 8 that we'll highlight is David Meslin. Now I have to tell you on a personal note that I read this book when it first came out. It was recommended by another counselor in the Eastern region, and I was very inspired by this. And then I thought, no, it's too radical to bring to council. No, I can't do this. But boy, this is just right on. I was so excited to see this kind of research. And once again, this is fact-based research. It's not an opinion, it's applied. He spoke at the conference, very excited to meet him. And so I bought and brought back with me Tear Down, Rebuilding Democracy from the Ground Up by David Meslin. And I'm going to hand this to the clerk. And it's also, I had it autographed to Minden Hills. Good things start in small places, Dave. So I'm going to give this to our clerk for all of us to have access to and read. And also I want to encourage the public to read it. It's available on audiobooks if you can't wait for this book. And maybe we can get it into circulation at our public libraries. But it's a really good kind of grounding for what we need to be doing in terms of building democracies. We had many presentations at this conference. One of them was by Senator Bernadette Clement, and she is a self-proclaimed, I would say, democracy nerd. Very, very interesting talk about her experiences and being involved at the Senate level. And what she said is, I'm going to quote her, "How we can't ignore democracies and institutions and simply assume that they are fine and unsaleable, or that if they aren't, that nothing can be done." So it's really important to be active and always thinking about what democracy is. And her experiences were only one of many, many voices at this 2-day launch of the Democracy Project. And then we'll go to slide number 9. And this research is undertaken by, as again, Momentum Projects between July 2023 and February of 2024. So you can see that the data is very recent, and various research methods, once again, were incorporated into this project. And you can get full access to the results of this report on the AMO website. So you go to AMO, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and you go to the Democracy Project, the little box that was circled on the previous slide up above, and then you can go through or you can actually click on these slides and go to the actual kind of synopsis of the project, or also to the full report that's available. So I want to make that available to everybody here as well as to the public. So are we on slide 10 yet? Sorry. So the web-based launch is now available. Many issues and concerns of municipalities are shared experiences. The AMO Democratic Engagement Solutions Bank is a collection of proven solutions to common issues. It's a really excellent bank of ideas. So you put in what you're looking for, and you can find examples of how people address that successfully from so many other communities. It's like the work is already there. So we talk about how democracy is changing, but we also need to look at how technology has changed to give us access to a broader perspective and to some research that's showing us if we want to get from A to B, this is what other people have done and has worked. So it's a really good, the tools that have come out with AMO in terms of this democracy project, and I can't help but mention the Rural Ontario Institute and the information they have about our statistics of Minden Hills and other rural communities across the province has been something that tells me we need to look at this so we know where we are to figure out where we want to go. So I'm very excited about all of this. And I think we can go to the next slide. And there is information there, once again, on how to access the online democracy project. One of the important things for me in representing you here today as a member of the public is that I'm going to ask you as a Roma rep and as a counselor here to give me feedback on things that you think we could do, and particularly what's unique or different in terms of creating democratic directions in rural communities, because we know rural and urban are very different animals in many ways, a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. So I'm looking for that uniqueness of rural areas and how we increase and encourage democracy and community building here locally as well and in rural areas. So I will be asking for that as we go on. So I want to thank everybody for their time today, and feel free to take up this information, and all the best to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members of council. Are there any questions or comments? Thank you, Councillor Saini. I think one of the issues that comes up for me is the fact that our senior levels of government, tend to pass a lot of rules and dictates to us here at the lower levels that make people feel that there's not an awful lot that can be accomplished. And obviously it's a multifactorial thing that affects all this, but the relationship between the senior governments and ourselves is, I think, one of the big issues, because we find ourselves hamstrung on so many issues, particularly on financial, the ability to have financials. I don't want to call it independence, but I guess the fact that I think, as we talked about yesterday at County Council, that our finances come from property tax, which was put into place sometime in the 1840s, and the provincial government has not changed the model since. And, we live in a very different world. So anyway, thank you. Please read the resolution.
Moved by Councillor McKelvey, seconded by Councillor Sisson. The council receives a delegation from Councillor Saini regarding an AMO workshop on healthy democracy as information.
All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to the adoption of minutes from the previous meeting. This is for the meeting of October 31st, 2024, regular council meeting minutes. Any comments or amendments? Councillor McKelvey.
Sorry, I wrote this down and then never told staff in advance, but Murray Ferry's last name is spelled wrong at the bottom of page 2. We could just fix that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Please read the resolution.
Moved by Councillor Sisson, seconded by Counselor Saney. Be it resolved that council approves the October 31st, 2024 regular council meeting minutes as amended.
All those in favor? That is carried. Payments of accounts for November 14th. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please read the resolution.
Moved by Counselor Ingram, seconded by Counselor Johansson. Be it resolved that the accounts in the amount of $306,619.67 be approved for payment.
All those in favor? That is carried. The mayor's report. At the last meeting, I was warning everybody about ghosts and goblins, and how much the times have changed in a few days. Tomorrow, we light the tree for our Christmas celebrations, and on Saturday, we have the Santa Claus parade. So I encourage everybody to come out for both of those events, and then actually more events after the Santa Claus parade over at the cultural center. So please come out and enjoy yourself as we get into the festive season. And also just to note that with the parade, there'll be lots of little kinders running around the town, so please be particularly careful with your driving. I have nothing else at this point. Moving on to the Roma board.
Yes, thank you. Roma hasn't met since our last meeting, but we do have a meeting this Friday, which would be tomorrow. And we will be, well, there's a couple of things I'll mention. One of them is the issue that our mayor has just raised regarding the finances to municipalities. This is something that Roma is working on. We need a new method of payments back to municipalities because the funding method just does not work anywhere for any of us, small or large communities. The kind of downloading that's taking place over decades as well. And we can't keep pulling from a regressive situation of increasing taxes to continue to support the infrastructure for safety and transportation, other basic needs. So that is something that our policy people are working on all the time, and that we are continually raising and strategizing with in terms of the Roma board's work. The other is that we'll be meeting with the Minister Calandra, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, as well on Friday. So we will be bringing him what we're hearing in our rural areas and trying to move forward to address our housing and other crises that we have in our municipalities. So I'm looking forward to that. It's new that he's going to be meeting with us and other ministers on a regular basis. So that is encouraging. And it's happens to be the two issues that our mayor has just raised too in response to the Democracy Project. So I'm can't be anything but encouraged by this continued education and bringing these issues forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to correspondence and communications. There were 3 items and nobody has asked that anything be brought forward. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. However, there is a request, or sorry, there is correspondence with regards to municipal delegation for the Roma conference. I'm not sure if anybody was interested in. It's item, yeah.
Number 2. I was just going to say before, if we are going to discuss that, we had yesterday at the county council, we put forward 2 delegations that we wish to have. One was with the Attorney General. We met, a small group met with the Attorney General a few weeks ago. This was a joint CKL, Haliburton County, and this was to do with issues that we have in public housing, particularly with crime and evictions and so on. And the Attorney General asked us to make a recommendation back to him and his department as to what we might suggest would be a better process than going through the landlord and tenant board. So we are looking to make a delegation, joint CKL Halliburton County delegation to the Attorney General to provide him with a recommendation that he asked for. The second one that we asked to have is with the Ministry of Education, and this was talking about the busing issue. We have 3 of the 4 municipalities here have schools, and it affects all of us. And although the school boards act independently, we think that the Ministry of Education could have perhaps some moral suasion or influence that they can put on. So those are the 2 delegations being requested at the county. Madam CAO, go.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there's a couple of options. We can talk about it now or offline. The only other one, so I had flagged the Minister of Education, so that's great news. The other one that planning and I have talked about is the Ministry of Transportation, and related to like entrances that we can have along MTO roads. It's really restrictive for a lot of development that we see in the future, but I don't know if that's our highest priority delegation at this point.
So before we proceed any further, so we'll just do the resolution. Sorry, I didn't want to
Okay.
interrupt anyone. We'll just proceed with the resolution then to pull the item for
11-2.
discussion, then
Yep.
we'll approve the other remaining items. If there's no other items to be pulled forward, that's okay. And then we'll finish and then we'll circle back.
So we're pulling 11-2.
Yes, please. Okay.
Okay.
So if I may have a mover and seconder for the direction to pull the item for discussion.
Councillor Johannesson, Councillor Saini.
So moved by Councillor Johansson, seconded by Councillor Saini, that council direct staff to pull item 11.2 municipal delegation request form for the 2025 Roma Annual Conference for discussion.
Those in favor? As carried. I'm going to do the consent.
Mover and a seconder for remaining items.
Need a mover and a seconder for the consent agenda to move 11.3. We have Councillor Ingram way down there and Councillor Sisson.
And Councillor Sisson, okay. Okay, moved by Councillor Ingram, seconded by Councillor Sisson, that council receives correspondence and communication items 11.1 and 11.3 for information.
All those in favor? That is carried. Now we can go to 11.2. All right, so does anybody have any thoughts on delegations? I know it's very difficult for municipalities to get the delegations. That's one of the reasons why we tried to put 3 municipalities or 4 municipalities together for the county for the Ministry of Education, because they probably wouldn't just meet with us. Councillor McKelvey.
I would like to hear more of what our CAO was mentioning with the MTO. I know they're very difficult to deal with and they're extremely slow. But I would need to know more before I could support that one.
I'll thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start, and I may invite our manager of planning to comment. I think we find that in looking at where we might develop within our community, sometimes it's along Highway 35. And I think from our standpoint, we see potential to intensify a little bit differently, different types of potential development. But we do need MTO on board if we're looking at things a little bit differently and more creatively. I don't know if our manager of planning might want to add some comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I certainly would agree with what our CAO has indicated. We do have certainly improving relationship with MTO in terms of consultation and being able to move through projects, but MTO requirements for things such as entrances are very restrictive, and so it does end up either making the process for approving potential development either very lengthy or near impossible. Certainly, we have seen projects come before council before that have been held up because specifically MTO requirements, and we certainly have others as well. And even when they are ones which are wanted by the municipality and certainly supported by staff, we still run into those issues. And a lot of it does have to do with the extreme restrictions that they have for things like entrances and development and intensification. So it's certainly something that impacts us.
I'll get to you. I guess, you know, your description of extreme restrictions may be, you know, just normal restrictions to them. The big question I would have is, you know, what would be the ask? Because if, you know, if you're going in to meet with the minister, you know, you really need to have an ask, and it has to be an ask that would be, you know, relevant right across the province, because if they were to change something, it's you know, this is a big deal. And you know, their credo on the wall is "Thou shalt not impede traffic along our, you know, King's highways." Any, please, if you have the ask, I would.
I think for us, it's, are there ways that we can look at, I think to your point, Mr. Mayor, I understand they want to do province-wide. However, some situations are uniquely
Yep.
different. And ours might be a little bit different than some. Perhaps we should take this away and flesh it out in a little bit more detail.
If it helps council, I did craft a resolution just to prepare. And I mean, we can leave it open, just that the CAO, the mayor, and council members attending Roma submit application requesting delegations. If you want to leave it to the four attendees to collaborate and discuss.
Not really. You know, I think it should be a council that decides. I guess. There we go. Just just in case anybody wanted to determine exactly when I said that. You know, it's it's difficult. You know, everybody. It seems that the last number of AMO and Roma conferences, that there are groups, whether they be at the municipal level or, you know, the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus or whatever, an awful lot of people who are asking for time in front of the ministers, which I think is really meant to be time in front of the ministers. They just want to get their, you know, have the ability to get their faces known or whatever. And I think it's like last time at the AMO conference, the number of delegation requests, I was talking to one of the ministers, you know, was well into the hundreds. And, you know, they get very restrictive as to what they're going to give. So I think you have to have something that is going to pique their interest also. So Councillor McKelvey first, and Councillor Saini.
Yeah, as far as the MTO, I would definitely need a lot more information as to what we're asking and what our problems are. And I really was happy to see the Minister of Education discussion at the county yesterday. And I think that's great if the four townships and the county go collectively. That's certainly going to get us a better opportunity to even meet the minister, because you're quite right. There's only so many things you can put out there. And if you start asking to meet with every minister about everything you're upset with, you will start to get no attention at all. So we need to make sure it's what's critical to us that we get there.
Councillor Saini?
Yes, thank you. I think this is a very important issue regarding having ability to work quickly between the ministries of transportation and particularly housing, as we could see at the latest project on our housing project on Highway 35. I would propose that we ask for a delegation And when we go to them, we ask for better communications between the Ministry of Transportation and Housing, because that has been a huge delay in getting this affordable housing built. And it's a very simple, they just created a department to reduce the red tape. So this is a great way to reduce red tape. It took us how many, was it 2 years? More than 2 years just to get permission from MTO to have an access point. And it was finally granted, but that was 2 or more years of a housing project, affordable housing project being delayed. So I think even if we just go forward with that request, and I would suggest those that are attending that haven't gone to deputations also take part in the leading that, because it's an opportunity to learn how to communicate and work with the provincial government. And so I would suggest, even if we just go and say, look at, this is the problem we ran into being on one of the corridors for a major highway in Ontario. And you held up just because of the red tape between departments. And I think if we just ask for that alone, it'll help us a great deal in further projects. It doesn't seem like a big ask, but I think if we accomplish it, it would be a big reward for us. So, and that's the question I have on that. I have some other questions about some other ones. Thank you.
So what's our deadline on the? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Saini. You had another one, you said?
Yeah, so I don't know if if we want to pursue this and see if we want to have a delegation just for that question first. I don't want to confuse it with different points here. So
I don't think we have enough.
Right.
You know, I was intimately involved with the situation. I think that one of the big issues with, unfortunately, with the MTO is it really comes down to who the people are. I think now we seem to be dealing with somebody who's a bit more reasonable and logical, and that's helpful than the previous person. I just don't see us. I'm just thinking of walking into the room facing the minister and you know, what am I going to say? Like, what is it that really is going to be my ask that is going to move the minister to want to do something? Because it's a huge bureaucracy within the MTO. So
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my recommendation now is that staff take this away and look at it much more thoroughly. There's other conferences that come up throughout the year that I'm sure we could come back to council if this is something we want to pursue. But I do take the comments that we don't have enough information quite yet. So I think the 2 areas that have been identified by the county are very important areas. And so I think if it's okay, Mr. Mayor, we'll take the recommendation off the table and flesh this out in much more detail for a future conference delegation potential.
okay, Councillor Saini, what was the other one?
yes, thank you. I of course would like to see more people new going to these delegations. To me, it's like encouraging people to vote. It's encouraging people to take place in discussing things with their ministers. I think that's pretty critical that we start to give other people those opportunities. We also, and we have the opportunity to do that here. The other is that, you know, the housing is under the jurisdiction of the county, not our local municipalities, though we are involved in it, and all our municipalities are involved in that in different ways. But having worked with the tenant landlord situations back in the 80s and 90s and seeing the evolution and how it hasn't worked often for tenants and how it hasn't often worked for landlords, I am curious to know more than that. It's coming forward as a recommendation from county, but what is the recommendation that's going to come forward regarding the alternatives to the Tenant Landlord Act? It'd be nice to know what that is before it goes representing our county. So that's one thing that I would like to know more about, at least. We know that the Tenant Landlord Board is not being very effective. It's got a backlog, it's underfunded, there's many, many things, and our housing crisis as it's growing isn't helping it. But if we're going to take something forward, I would like to know what that is before it goes forward. I think that's basic democracy myself. The other is supporting the issues around the school buses. I think that's pretty critical, and really would like to see that taken forward as well. And once again, new people to take part in those delegations who haven't done it before, because that's where we're going to get our continued leadership. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay.
I think Councillor Saini has a question regarding the second item that the county is taking as a delegation regarding what is the Landlord Tenant Act, like what is the county going to propose be the alternate options
Okay.
to what's going on now? Is that correct? Did I hit that right?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
So what I pushed for yesterday was the fact that the Attorney General in our meeting 2 weeks ago asked us to make a proposal. And so we have said that we would like to make the proposal at the Roma conference. So now we will meet and decide what that proposal should be. He gave us some ideas as to what we might do. In other words, having us have public housing be able to work somewhat separately from the landlord tenants board. Okay, because some of the issues that we have are very unique to public housing. In other words, if you are a landlord and understand that they are now up to like 9,000 complaints per month. And you know, most of them are I'm going to call them administrative issues because you know, somebody's not paying the rent, or somebody's saying that the landlord isn't providing, you know, heat in the building, whatever it is. In public housing, we have to take people off of a list to put into public housing. And some of the issues that we deal with regarding crime, which is violence in a lot of cases, human trafficking, prostitution, drugs, make our buildings somewhat less safe for the people that we are meant to house. In other words, we often have to deal with people who are elderly, you know, single parent families, people that may have some limited capacities, whether it be mental or physical, that end up in our buildings. And we want to be in a situation where we don't have one or two individuals who are terrorizing that building. And so the rules that we had to follow on the landlord and tenant board were sometimes more than 14 months before we could take action against somebody. Meanwhile, the majority of the people that we are trying to house were being terrorized or having you know, having difficulties in living in the buildings. So we suggested to the minister or the attorney general that perhaps there would be another way for us to be able to approach that. He said, sounds great. I talked to the people in the north. They had a meeting with the people who have public housing across the north, and he offered to them the same challenge to come up with something different. So now with CKL and with both with the housing, so Court Lakes Halliburton Housing Corporation, and our our Jack committee, which is all the social services, we are going to come up with some recommendation. But that's where it is. But that recommendation has not been written or can be shared now because it doesn't exist. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for explaining a little bit more of that background, because that was kind of hanging out there and wondered what was going on. There's, the concerns I have is in terms of coming up with those alternatives, if we will, for public housing, that we have people with lived experience involved in that decision making, some really good research, because sometimes where we're sitting and our own experiences don't bring the real issues forward. I was just talking yesterday to a woman who's living in a tent in Kawartha Lakes, and she was kicked out of housing because whenever it rained or whenever there was really cold or some weather conditions, the people that she knew that were living in the margins came and stayed at her place, and to the point that they even kicked in her door because they had nowhere else to go if she wasn't there. And these were her friends that were living on the streets, and she lost her housing. She was kicked out because of her friends that came in because they had nowhere to go. And so that is one of the issues that I think we need to consider, is when we're starting to take people and remove them, what is a criminal act? Do we want to say that people who use drugs don't live in our social housing? So I think there's a whole lot of things there that are extremely important to consider, particularly as we are in this crisis situation. I have great appreciation for the situation that we're in. And I also recall when involved with cooperative housing, in cooperative housing, initially, it was people could choose who lived in that building, almost like you would choose who's going to live in your home. If they needed a lawyer, they would go for the lawyer. If they needed someone who was good at cleaning the hallways, they would bring them in and interview them, and that was a criteria. Then it changed at the provincial level, where we had to go on the same social housing list. And that had created a lot of problems for cooperative housing that was a community, in terms of what was going on within those units. So there's a lot of history here to be considered that I want to make sure that is brought to that decision-making body that's going forward. And this is where I think is so critically important, because oftentimes from our own perspectives, we think we have the answers. And we really need to do the research and get a broader understanding. And it is very frustrating, and it's horrible when we see some of the things that are going on, and just as horrible is how those situations came to be and how people have gotten into these situations. So I just want more information. We need to do something, but I don't want us to be doing things that are going to take more people out of social housing because their friends go there out of the rain. Thank you.
Councillor McKelvey?
But that's a delegation request. The county's already put in with CKL. We're not involved, like this township doesn't want to put in another delegation request, I'm assuming, to the Minister of Housing. Okay,
No.
good. I would support that.
Go ahead. Need a mover and a seconder to receive 11.2 as information. Deputy Mayor Shell, Councillor Johannesson.
Don't we have to put something in there to participate in the Ministry of Education one, or no?
No.
Okay.
No, that'll be the 4 municipalities through the county will do it.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Shell, seconded by Councillor Johannesson, that council receives the municipal delegation request form for the 2025 Roma Annual Conference as information.
All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to department reports, we quickly drop down to fire services. Bring on the heat, please.
Good morning. Not sure how to start after that, but thank you for that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to start with just apologizing to the members of council. It's been a while since I've presented one of these stats reports. There's no excuse for that. That's my responsibility, and we will try to be a little bit more frequent with these types of reports. Moving into the report itself, having said that I need to do this a little bit more often, I'm not going to go line by line through this. I'm trusting that members of council have read the report. The call volume for this period last year was 201 calls. For this same period this year is 205. So very similar numbers. Overall on the year, we're up roughly, I believe, 14 calls over last year at this time. So very similar numbers with a slight increase. The biggest numbers being medical calls, car accidents, and public assist. Also, obviously, with the big storms that we had come through this summer, there was a large increase in hydro-related calls, whether it's trees on lines or lines down or transformer explosions, that sort of thing. As far as public education, our numbers were similar. We participated in all of the in-person events, the truck pull, the county fair, that sort of thing. We had booths set up with firefighters in attendance with the trucks and handing out public information, trinkets and placards and all that sort of thing. The other big thing that we did this year that was started was the SAFE program, which is the smoke alarms for everyone. We had 16 requests through the website for the fire department to attend. We also did a door-to-door campaign over the course of the late summer, early fall. We don't have the numbers of how many homes we actually went into, but we did hand out over 500 door hangers that were left for people to reach out if they had questions or wanted us to come back and visit them again. We will be presenting to council in the new year a report on the SAVE program as to how it fared over the course of the entire year. Other than that, there's not much else to add. Training, we had covered a number of topics over the course of this report for training, and we are doing our best to increase the amount of public education we do through social media and print media. So I will open it up to questions.
Deputy Mayor Schell?
Not so much a question as a comment, and having it this many months at once in front of me made me be able to look at numbers easier. The education obviously has improved, because the biggest thing I noticed was in your unauthorized burns, last year you had 29 in this period, and this year you only had 16. And the other thing was the grass and brush fires went from 11 down to 6. So almost half on both things. So maybe with continued education and the social media, that it can even be less next year. So that is like applause. That's amazing.
I thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. As much as I would love to take credit for that, some of it does have to be geared towards the weather this year.
Well,
It was a very wet season, but I'll take that pat on the back.
but the
anyway,
unauthorized burns have nothing to do with weather.
True.
I mean,
this
you're
is true.
talking like 29 down to 16. That's
Yes.
impressive. Thank
Thank you.
you.
How is staffing?
Our staffing numbers right now, we are at full complement. We have 25 firefighters on the roster. And our attendance at training is probably around 60%. Obviously, the last couple of months with hunting seasons opening, it was a little bit lower, but training at attendance has been around 60 to 70%, and our roster is full at the moment.
So on the way in, it was difficult not to notice how low the river was, and all of our rivers are low and lakes are low because we're pretty much in a drought at this point. And I do know that you did have a fairly significant brush fire recently. What's how are you feeling on that situation?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, although it was a wet summer season, the fall has been very dry. but we have been helped by the cooler temperatures. So although we did have that one big fire there several weeks ago, it actually has been okay as of late, even without much rain in the last 2 months.
And the November 1 is, we have a change in the rules with open burning. Any concerns there with?
Not at this time. We did issue several permits for contractors or people clearing lots. But other than that, we have, since November 1st, we have not had any burn complaints. So again, touch wood, so far so good.
Councillor Sisson first.
Yeah, I think in response, I think the no daytime burning really helped with these numbers. I'm sure you'll agree with me on that.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, obviously it's the law, it's provincial law, so that helps with the enforcement piece. But absolutely, it does help reduce the number of fires and as well as the nuisance calls as well.
Great. Barry, go ahead.
Other question I had is, see a bill for a new pickup. Have you got a new pickup in your shop yet, or in the garage getting some lights on it, or where are we at with that?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor, the new car 2, as it will be known, is right now is in Belleville getting the lights and sirens installed.
Okay, Councillor Deputy Mayor Shell.
I do have a question now that you've made the comment about being full complement at 25. Is that still enough? Before we come into budget season, like I thought we had gone to 27 at this council, but maybe it was another.
Through the chair,
place.
thank you for that question, Councillor. And my preference would be to have a number around 30. But at this point, with other pressures on the budget, that's not something that we've discussed moving forward in the short term, but definitely in the long term, that is my goal.
Just
Go
to
ahead.
follow up to that, council needs to be aware that it's been 25 for a very long time, and the call volume has increased drastically over the last 5 to 10 years. So just something for everyone to consider.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councillor McKelvey.
Just, first of all, appreciation to the volunteers, because there's a lot of calls and they're missing a lot of sleep
Yeah.
or dinners or
Life.
birthdays or any number of things. So my appreciation. And the training, we had something a while ago, and I can't recall what it was, but there was something about our training not being up to where it needed to be for us to participate with the county training. So we were going to do a different process.
Through the chair. So I think that was more of a misunderstanding as opposed to any other issue. I believe what you're referring to was the Minden Hills Fire Department did not participate in the annual recruit training that happened that was typically put on by the county fire departments. And the reason for that at the time was we had a large number that joined in that time, and we couldn't wait to join the county recruit training. And so we did it ourselves in-house. Obviously, this was before I joined, but that was the reason for that. We are part of the county training. We are actually, this coming weekend there's a break because of the Santa Claus parade, but the weekend following will be the second weekend of a hazmat course that is being put on for the county departments that is actually being hosted here in Minden Hills.
Go ahead.
The question I have is on the list, public assist. There was 30 in September. What's that?
So there is no definition for a public assist other than we're helping out, whether it's just helping out members of the public, or it could be helping another agency, whether it's paramedics or police. That is kind of a miscellaneous category, if you will, something that can't be defined specifically. It goes under that type of a category.
Question for you. We have heard that, for various reasons, the EMS is now residing locally a little bit more because they're not doing a lot of transports down to other hospitals. Have you noticed that the ambulances are more available and you don't have to be the one responding?
Through the chair, that's difficult to say. We do still respond to a large quantity of medical assist calls. But with that being said, probably 9 times out of 10, the paramedics are there ahead of us. But we are required typically if for lift assist, so a patient that is maybe too large for just the two paramedics to handle, or gaining access to buildings, gaining access to rooms. For example, we had a call just a couple of weeks ago. We had to, we were asked initially to remove a toilet so that a person could be removed from a room. So that sort of thing. But as far as the numbers go, they have not decreased as of yet. But the province is moving to a new system as far as EMS dispatching, and we are hopeful that that will decrease the number of medical calls that the fire department runs.
Okay, and the last question for me is, um, naloxone, do you carry that in your vehicles? And
Through the chair, we do carry the naloxone, but at this point, we have not received the full certification training to administer it to the public. We carry it for our own safety. If a member of the public can go to the grocery store, get a naloxone kit, they require no training to administer it. As healthcare professionals, the fire department, we must be certified in order to administer it. So at this point in time, we carry it just for our own personal safety. So if, for example, we are performing CPR on an individual and they have overdosed and one of the firefighters were to be exposed to something like fentanyl, we carry the naloxone to administer that to the firefighter
okay,
for our safety. But we will be moving forward with the training.
okay, who gives that training?
We have to get it through either Red Cross or St. John's Ambulance or something like that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Chief. Please read
Thank
the
you.
resolution.
Moved by Counselor Ingram, seconded by Counselor Younisson, that Council receive report 2418, May to September 2024 fire summary for information.
All those in favor? It is carried. We will take a break until 10:30 because
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, report 24-82 is topic about every planner's favorite, which is more legislative changes. So this one is specific to Bill 185, the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act. So there were a number of changes in this that are again, similar to the PPS, the provincial planning statement that we talked about at the last council meeting, that have more long-term planning implications. What this report focuses on, again, is anything that's more immediate to our everyday, day-to-day processing for applications. Some of this doesn't really impact Minden Hills, so I'll sort of go over the ones that have more of an impact to our day-to-day processing, and happy to answer any questions then as well. So the first big one is no mandatory pre-consultation for any Planning Act applications. This one was a disappointing one to see because we do find that pre-consultation is very helpful. The positive I can say is that most people seem to agree with that. And so we do certainly still encourage people to go through pre-consultation, and almost every single time people still do go through that process. The level of information and guidance that they get in terms of policy and requirements, I think leads people to still wanting to have pre-consultation. So I'm happy to say that we're still seeing certainly a high level of that. As well, there are no application refunds. I can't remember which one anymore, but one of the previous bills did introduce that if council had not made a decision on an application within a certain number of days, applicants could request refunds. That has been repealed now through Bill 185. I'm happy to say that Minden Hills never had to refund anybody their application fees, but I'm also very happy to say that we don't have to worry about it anymore. So that one is now added there as well. They also did eliminate third-party appeals for official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendments. So this goes together with, they had previously done this for minor variances, consents and subdivisions, so that we now see that essentially across the board for Planning Act applications. Applicants can also now appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal anytime during the processing of an application, which also includes during pre-consultation, if they think the requirements are unwarranted. I think there's good and bad parts to that. I think it does keep staff certainly accountable to be making sure that we're asking for studies or other requirements that are necessary for applications, but it certainly does lend itself to more potential tribunal hearings. So should an applicant not agree with staff's determination on requirements. As well, there was discussion when Bill 185 came out that the minister could now release regulations in order to create more restrictions, or I shouldn't say more restrictions, but guide municipalities more so on what they can or can't restrict when it comes to additional dwelling units. So coincidentally, back in September, they did release proposed regulations. That has now closed, I believe, but a decision hasn't been made. There is only one that they've brought forward thus far that would have an impact to our current zoning bylaw. It doesn't actually impact our additional dwelling unit policies or regulations that we previously had passed. It's to do with the core zone category. So right now for our R1 and R2, so those are two residential types that we have within the town. Those would require a minimum of 45% lot coverage, where right now those two zone categories only permit maximum of 30 to 35%. So if those regulations go through, then we would have to consider those changes. But again, that would be something that will come forward as that occurs. And I think that's really it. The only other major change was that they did introduce the minister zoning order framework. The framework hasn't actually changed to the process that was there before, but they've actually sort of formalized it and made it so that public and municipalities, developers know what the expectations are. So it sort of works the same way that it did before. It's just that now they've sort of set it in stone as a formalized process. Happy to answer any questions.
Councillor McKelvey?
One of the things I wondered about was, we did a bylaw making pre-consultation mandatory because of one of these other bills. I'm not going to even pretend to know which one of the many. So some townships have gone and rescinded that. Should we be doing that as well?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's a great question. I think the legislation from the province doesn't necessarily require it, but in sort of the administrative tidiness, it might make sense to consider that. So I can take that back and discuss that with the clerk as well.
Go ahead.
So the other thing was the ADUs and this lot coverage. So when this is finally in regulations, the draft, is that what you're saying right now? So
Correct, yes.
you will be coming back then and we will have to do a zoning bylaw amendment only for if they have an ADU, or will R1 and R2 go to 45% lot coverage no matter whether they have an ADU or not?
Through Mr. Mayor, so based on my understanding, it would only be specific to if they have an ADU. It might be because that sort of doesn't make entire sense. It might be relevant for us to consider whether or not that's just something that we change for that zone category.
Okay, and this is just my preference, so I would like to see us look at the regulations that we put in place for ADUs, because we're not getting any ADUs constructed. And I still felt we were a little bit over restrictive on them. So I don't know if council wants to entertain such a thing, but if we're going to go into our zoning bylaw and make an amendment with regard to ADUs, perhaps we could look at the other parts. If anybody else sees the wisdom.
Well, I think if the planning department is looking at it, they can look at the whole picture and see what recommendations they may have for that.
Through Mr. Mayor, I would just say is for something, if we're going to bring forward an amendment to deal with any of the changes to legislation, it's a great time to bring forward any other changes that we see to be appropriate and have a not huge change, but just sort of addressing some of those other housekeeping things as well.
So I know that every time you think that it's safe to go back in the water, the province comes in with another law or so. But with what is existing right now, how many regulations are there that you are still waiting for? Like how many more definitions are you waiting for in general?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's a great question. I don't actually know. I know of at least 3 that we're sort of still waiting on, one of which is even just transition rules for the provincial planning statement. It's in place, but the transition rules haven't actually been passed yet. So sort of a chicken and the egg situation. But so yes, there are some that we're still waiting for. There are still some that we're waiting for from previous bills gone by many years ago that never come forward. So we don't always know if those regulations are actually going to come forward. It's just that the minister has the option of bringing them forward. So.
And do you know, sorry, rumor has it that, we may be facing an election in the spring. Do you know if anything is imminent? Because if we get into an election period, we're not going to get anything for some time. But is there anything that you really need, direction on right now, or can we still live with what we got?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think for now we can live with what we have.
Okay. Councillor Saini?
Yes, I just want to say thank you for this overview of and what is going on with the province, because I know sometimes the public goes to the planning and building department and expecting different things, and they don't realize that what we're trying to do and what we have to do is to maintain all of these provincial decisions and changes constantly. And it is across the board that all of our municipalities are very frustrated with all of these changes and the planning staff. So we're not unique, but I think it's great that you brought all these forward so the public also, not just council, but the public understands the pressure that you are under to keep up all of these kinds of changes. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Please read the resolution.
Moved by Councillor Sisson, seconded by Councillor Saini, that council receives report 2482 Planning Bill 185 Cutting the Red Tape to Build More Homes Act 2024 as information.
All those in favor? That is carried. Please proceed with your next report.
Through Mr. Mayor, Report 2491 is with respect to application PLZBA 2024-063, property owners Roberta and Carol Cox, and I don't have anything further to add from the public meeting this morning.
Sorry, Councillor McKelvey.
Something I noticed on this file, and I'm not, it's not specific to this file. I think it's something we might want to consider on a broader spectrum, but in this particular case, there's a storage container on, which we don't allow, but clearly we have thousands, I think now. So if there was more violations in a file, would we not be wise to deal with those violations when we're processing an application? Like, it's just, it's a privilege to get a rezoning in a certain degree. Or purchasing a shoreline road allowance or any number of planning applications. Should we try to clear up the problems while we're processing them?
Through Mr. Mayor, so usually we try to keep land use in terms of the principle of land use separate from something that might be strictly like a bylaw enforcement, like for property standards, for example. We try to keep them separate unless one of them has an implication on the other. I'd have to really take that back to staff and discuss whether or not that's something that we would want to venture into. But again, otherwise we do try to keep those two processes separate.
I think that might be a worthwhile discussion to have with staff, not necessarily, affecting this item today, but going forward. Councillor McKelvey?
So yeah, I don't want to just decide that this is the one we're going to start on. But I think it's something we definitely need to look at, and it is definitely what other townships do. I'm not sure what Highlands East does, but you know what? I've seen that at severance applications, Highlands East will make them bring building compliance in. So, and I do know Dysart and Algonquin Highlands look at the whole property, and if, like I said, a lot of times these planning applications are a privilege, and we need to utilize that opportunity to perhaps deal with some bylaw infractions.
Any other questions? Please read the resolution.
Moved by Councillor McKelvey, seconded by Councillor Saney, that Council receive report 2491 planning as information. And further that bylaw 24-118, being a bylaw to approve the zoning bylaw amendment for lands subject of PLZBA 2024-063, be referred to the bylaw section of the agenda.
All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on.
Through Mr. Mayor, Report 24-92 is with respect to application PLZB 2024-041, owned by Mr. John Kellett, and I have nothing further to add from the public meeting.
Any questions? Please read the resolution.
Moved by Councillor McKelvey, seconded by Deputy Mayor Shell, that Council receive report 2492 planning as information, and further that bylaw 24-119, being a bylaw to approve the zoning bylaw amendment for land subject of PLZBA 2024-041, be referred to the bylaw section of the agenda.
All those in favor? That is carried. 2493.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this report is with respect to application PLZB 2024-056, also owned by Mr. John Kellett, and I have nothing further to add from the public meeting.
Councillor Sisson.
Just looking at this with the hazard land area, is this lot big enough to get a building permit on? There's a lot of hazard land on it, I noticed.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and yes, it certainly does have quite a bit of hazard land on it, but it does have a viable building envelope where they could meet requirements for the setbacks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Please read the resolution.
Moved by Councillor Saney, seconded by Councillor Sisson, that that Council receive report 2493, planning as information, and further that bylaw 24-120, being a bylaw to approve the zoning bylaw amendment for lands subject of PLZBA 2024056 be referred to the bylaw section of the agenda.
All those in favor? That is carried. 2494.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this report is with respect to lifting the holding provision from 1419 Claude Brown Road. So there was a zoning bylaw amendment that was passed on this property, and the holding provision was subject to site plan agreement being executed. That has now been completed, fulfilling the requirements of that holding, and so it would be appropriate this time to pass the requisite bylaw.
Any questions? Please read the resolution.
Moved by Counselor Saney, seconded by Counselor Sisson, that council receive report 2494 planning as information, and further that bylaw 24-121 being a bylaw to remove the holding provision from the land subject of PLRZH 2024058 be referred to the bylaw section of the agenda.
All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, Ms. Doherty. We will now be moving into closed session. Madam Clerk, please read the resolution.
Moved by Counselor Ingram, seconded by Counselor Johansson, be it resolved that council proceed into closed session at 10:46 a.m. for the purpose of discussing the following. One item pursuant to section 239(2)D of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended regarding labor relations or employee negotiations workload. One item pursuant to section 239(2)E of the Municipal Act as amended regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. Legal update service contract.
All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, all those who have been watching our meeting today. We will be moving into closed session. When we return, we will be handling administrative matters. So for all intents and purposes, this ends our meeting for today. And thank you, and we'll see you next time. Okay, welcome back. We start with the resolution, please.
Moved by Counselor Ingram, seconded by Counselor Johansson, that be it resolved that closed session adjourn at 11:32 a.m. and open session resume.
All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any report from closed session? Do we?
We gave a little bit of direction.
Okay.
Moved by Counselor Johansson, second by Counselor Ingram, be it resolved that the direction given in closed session be approved.
All those in favor? That is carried. Bylaws.
Moved by Counselor McKelvey, seconded by Deputy Mayor Shell, be it resolved that the following bylaws be received, read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed. Bylaw 24-118, zoning bylaw amendment, PLZBA 2024063. Bylaw 24-119, zoning bylaw amendment, PLZBA 2024041. Bylaw 24-120, zoning bylaw amendment, PLZBA 2024056. And bylaw 24-121, removing the holding symbol PLRZH 2024058.
All those in favor? That is carried. Confirming bylaw.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Shell, seconded by Councilor McKelvey, that bylaw 24-122, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held during its meeting of November 14th, 2024, be received, read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed.
All those in favor? It's carried. And then adjournment.
Moved by Councilor Sisson, seconded by Councilor Saini, be it resolved that the November 14th, 2024 regular council meeting is hereby adjourned at 11:34 a.m.
All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. Our next meeting is a special council meeting on Thursday, November 21st at 9 a.m. and is for the 2025 draft budget overview and the water and wastewater rates. See you all at the Santa Claus Parade.